Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Mary Longbottom, your facilitator for today's service. I welcome all of you here in person and those on Zoom. So if you're willing and able, let's stand up and wave to everybody and say hello. Hello. Hello, Zoomies. Thanks. Okay, please take a moment to turn off your cell phones. If you wish to have a particular announcement or joy or sorrow read during our service, please remember to fill out the forms on the table in the back, and someone will bring them up to me. If you are new here, please ask any of us how to access our website or to find out how to get involved in any of our activities. If you would like to receive our newsletter, please ask Deborah Smith or Becky Tanner how to put your name on our mailing list. So before our service begins, we have a few announcements. Tina's office hours will be on the normal day, Tuesday, the 19th of December, just a little earlier from 11 to 2. So please do give her a call or text to set up a time if you wish to come in on Tuesday. Are there any other announcements? Back there in the box. Okay, fine. And remember that Free Thinkers will be meeting in the community room at 1 p.m. today. See Roland for more information back there. Okay, now we have our story for all.
Actually, there's one more thing. I believe Tricia Gerardette is willing to meet with people in what we now call the library. It's the room with books beyond the kitchen, and talk about our bylaws changes within the church. And then January 7th, after church, 12:15, anyone who wants to is invited to a Zoom meeting with all the Baja 4 churches to talk about bylaw changes for the whole of the UUA. In specific, they want to make they want to add something to it all. I don't know if you've seen the new diagram is these petals of equity and justice. And a group in Tucson wants to add peace. There's love in the middle of all of that. And if you're interested in hearing how to do that, learn more, you can do that at 12:15 on the 7th of January. And then the 10th of January, Wondering Wednesday, 6 p.m., for 4 weeks, we're going to talk about the bylaws changes, for the changes possibly with our principles and our sources. And so if you're someone who likes bylaws, they actually can be kind of fun, I discovered yesterday, till I hit the wall.
I don't know.
Yeah, they sound really dry, but if you have a good interpreter, like Molly was for our board yesterday, I know Tricia will be today. If you want to talk about our bylaws changes, go to the library with your coffee and your food, and you can talk about it. Hope that was clear as mud.
So, welcome again. Tomorrow is United Nations International Day of the Migrant. Every year on the 18th of December, the world marks International Migrants Day, a day set aside to recognize the important contribution of migrants while highlighting the challenges they face. And here are some pretty horrifying statistics. According to the World Bank 2023 report on migration, as of the end of 2022, there were 184 million people, 2.3% of the world's population, living outside their country of nationality, which is one of the definitions of a migrant. Almost half of them are currently living in low and middle income countries. And of course, since the start of 2023, there have been an additional 2 million migrants at our southern border, coming from as far afield as China, Cameroon, Uzbekistan, as well as Central and South America. They've walked straight into a political quagmire with implications that reach all the way to Ukraine and the Middle East. As the world struggles to cope with global economic imbalances, diverging demographic trends, and climate change, migration will become a necessity in the decades to come for countries at all levels of income. If managed well, migration can be a force for prosperity and can help achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But I think we can all agree that migration is not being managed well for all sorts of reasons. This figure of 184 million people includes 37 million refugees, or those of forced displacement, who live outside their country of origin. The number of refugees worldwide increased from 27.1 million in 2021 to 37 million at the end of 2022, the largest increase ever recorded. The increase was largely due to refugees from the Ukraine fleeing the international armed conflict in their country. But in the Ukraine, and now with over 2 million Palestinians, most people who are forced to flee never cross an international border, remaining displaced within their own countries. As Antonio Guterres, General Secretary of the United Nations, said way back in 2018, as a global community, we face a choice. Do we want migration to be a source of prosperity and international solidarity, or a byword for inhumanity and social friction? Our opening words today, Holiday Season Prayer, are from Reverend Wayne B. Arneson, who retired in 2016 after 40 years of Unitarian Universalist ministry in several congregations. Spirit of life, the beginning of the holiday season is filled with temptations to conspicuous consumptions and pleas for generosity. The contrast between the values represented by this time of year and our ability to fulfill them remind us how great the distance can be between aspirations and actions. The month has begun with the observance of World AIDS Day, Human Rights Day, and UN Day of the Migrants follows tomorrow. They remind us of those at home and abroad who are imprisoned by disease, poverty, and discrimination. The messages of liberation, dignity, and joy that come with Hanukkah and with Christmas are hard to hear unless they are conveyed by gracious acts of outreach to those who suffer. Our prayer this day, then, is that we may be gentle with ourselves and with others as we do our best to navigate through the tricky shoals of December. May we avoid being so distracted with our own problems and duties this year that we forget the wider web of life of which we are a part. May we go about our rounds of preparations and festivities with a light heart and with boundless patience. May the dissatisfactions that are part of our lot be companions but not our masters as we cross the holiday threshold. And may all the joys of the season be ours this time around. Light the chalice? Okay. Good job.
Better version.
Okay. As we light this chalice today in this place, may you know that all of you, all your frustrations, all your joys, all your generosity, and all your neediness are welcome here. Amen. As a congregation, we share life together, amplifying our joy and making sorrow easier to bear by bringing both here to each other in community. I will add a stone for each joy or sorrow into this bowl, and will add several at the end for those which have not been spoken but lie in our hearts. Tina has a sorrow. Her remaining college roommate, Jamie Layton, had her daughter, Marissa Hoare, die suddenly December 4th at the age of 23. Marissa battled mental illness and stood strongly against homophobia, transphobia, and fat shaming. Tina says, please, in Marissa's honor, love on everyone in your lives, even migrants and strangers, and let everyone you know in person that they are beautiful inside and out, to counter the harsh messages of our anti-fat, anti-aging, anti-so-much culture.
And I have a second one that's related, again about youth. I think I told you all that we rented the community room at the end of October for an award ceremony for the cross-country team. And there was a junior who reached out to me, came the day before, hid some goodies, so on the day he could spray the seniors with streamers and confetti. And then David noticed him vacuuming in front of the church. He didn't understand why. this lovely, wonderful kid, you may have read about driving, doing donuts, drifting, and wrapping his car with younger siblings in it around a tree this week. He's an amazing human being. And everyone I've talked to about it hasn't judged. They've said, but we all made stupid mistakes. And his mother's pretty hard on him. She's the one who made sure he vacuumed. But I can tell that she is really, really relieved. I was so relieved. Friday night, I woke up and I couldn't sleep anymore. I was so euphoric that he and his sister, who were going into surgery, she said they will likely be okay with a lot of love and healing time. So I ask you to hold up those two, but all youth. It's always been hard to grow up, right? But I don't think the pandemic helped with any of that. And I think it's especially hard in different ways right now. So love on all the young people in your life and all the people in your life.
And I'll add stones again for all those joys and sorrows that we hold in our heart.
A couple years ago, 2019, so I guess that's more like 4 years ago, in June, Mary and I celebrated 20th of June, which is the UN Day of the Refugee. And today we're looking at International Migrants Day. And I keep finding different definitions of what it means to be a migrant, what it means to be a refugee. Some say a migrant is one who goes across the border of their land to another country. Some say those are people who choose to move versus refugees who are forced to move. But when I look at it, how many people would leave unless they were really forced to go? In early 2020, a group of us were on the border feeding asylum seekers. And most people there are called migrants, not refugees. There was a family of 4 kids from 17 to 9 traveling as minors together from Guerrero in Mexico, in the south, where drug dealers were forcing people off land so that they could grow drugs there. Now, is that an economic reason to leave? Is that a political one? Were they in danger? I like the way Pope Francis looks at it. So there's another day. We probably should just celebrate it. In September, it's called the World Day of Migrants and Refugees. And this year, his theme was, he talks about how the migratory flows of our times are the expression of a complex and varied phenomenon that, to be properly understood, requires a careful analysis of every aspect of its different stages, from departure to arrival, including the possibility of return. As a contribution to this effort, I've chosen to devote the message for the 109th World Day of Migrants, which was in September, Migrants and Refugees, to the freedom that should always mark the decision to leave one's native land. Free to leave, free to stay. And this was an initiative of solidarity promoted several years ago by the Italian Episcopal Conference as a concrete response to the challenges posed by contemporary migration movements. From attentive listening to the particular churches, the Pope says he'd come to see ensuring that freedom is a widely shared pastoral concern. Again, another image of a future that's aspirational, like a world without a wall, to have the freedom to choose to leave or stay or be able to return again. Isn't that what we should aim for? And we want to mark a world in which it used to be 60,000, now it's 100 million people are displaced, and some of them technically called refugees, but all of them vulnerable, all of them far from home. In the Ukraine, some of them are still within the country, but far from where they once lived. It doesn't really matter. I think what we're talking about are people who are forced to leave because of war or economics, because of the environment. Right now, the main countries people are leaving from are Syria, Afghanistan, Sudan, and Ukraine. That's what's happening right now. And so, as we head towards Christmas, I thought a lot about what does migration and what do Christmas have in common, right? How many of you face Christmas wanting some deeper connection with it? That every year, how do you make it fresh? How do you make it meaningful? Does anyone think of that like I do? Yeah. Yeah, raise both hands. And as a minister, it's like, how do you preach about this fresh every year? What does it mean? For Christians, this is a really important celebration. In the West, it is the celebration of the year. In the East, the Orthodox churches really lift up the rebirth, resurrection of Jesus. Easter is totally irreplaceable. Even in atheist Russia, when I lived there, they couldn't take away Easter. It still happened. Christmas they could rebrand as the New Year. And I think I've said when things changed in the 90s, 89, 90 on, they started having 2 Christmases and 2 New Years because they had 2 calendars. You know, the Julian and the Gregorian, and this had changed since the Revolution. And so they had 4 hefty celebrations a year in the beginning. But for a long time under the Soviet Union, they were able to rebrand Christmas as New Year's, a New Year's tree. But in the West, Christmas is really important. For some reason, Christians in the West care about the fact this divine being came and lived among us, became flesh, walked among us. What does that mean for Unitarian Universalists who don't live inside that story? For me, that is now more of a metaphor. We don't live inside it believing, perhaps some of us do, some of us don't, that a supernatural being took on this kind of avatar of living as a human being and walked in our midst. But I still think there's something valuable for all of us to think about. How do we make the holy tangible? How is the sacred something we can see? And this week, I want to emphasize, how does becoming more human make us more able to see the holy, more able to believe and uphold love? As I've said before, for me, human love is the superpower that we can tap into. When I do weddings, I tell people, if you don't want me to talk about human love, I can't do your wedding. I don't have to talk about God, I don't have to pray, but human love, you know, and they're like, well, yeah, of course, that's why we're getting married. So I thought a lot about, what does it mean for us to be more human? What does it mean that Jesus was born? I used to be really annoyed that he wasn't female, right? Once again, the patriarchy, but actually for him to be male was worse. A kid born without a father as a girl could marry and take her husband's name. But Jesus is this illegitimate kid, born in a stable, in the muck, can't ever really get a name, except, you know, Son of God and all that. But is very, very on the margins. And the people who notice the birth, shepherds, in that society were seen as unclean, and we kind of would see that too, because they handled the body fluids of animals. They were never fully clean. They couldn't become clean easily in the temple. They were just on the margins. And this idea of Jesus being on the margins has been very important, especially in Latin America, where people adopted liberation theology and saw Jesus is on the side of the poor. God is standing with those in the margins. And it's easier to believe when your God is in the form of someone born next to cow manure, and right? So there's something to be said for that. But I think for all of us, there's something important to see in becoming more human. And the story of migration, which is also the story of Jesus, Soon after he was born, his adoptive foster father, Joseph, has a dream that says, "You must go to Egypt to stay safe." And they survive a genocide of small children by doing that, right? It's a horrifying story. And his migration was forced. He was a refugee. He came back. He understands this. So for me, I don't look so much to the traditional ways we try to remember Christmas. It's said that St. Francis was traveling in a carriage late at night, and he saw shepherds out in the fields of Italy, and he thought, oh, I can't bring people to the shepherds, but maybe we could make little figures and bring the shepherds to the people. What do we call those? Creches, yes. So the theory, the legend is that it started with St. Francis. I don't know, but the point is to see physically the stable and the shepherds and the angel and the star. And I love it when people add octopus and, anything that you care about being present then, right? It brings you into the story. But even more powerful for me is the story of those who are on the margins, who are the migrants in our worlds. And it can be very, very painful to enter into that story and understand it. I've lived here 18 years. I didn't go to the border for like the first 15. And it's just such a painful story to see. I've been many times since. But you have to convince yourself to go see it, to try to understand it, to live it, to talk to people who are doing it. And I have found, 4 years ago, I read from A.A. Gill, who was a British journalist who died of cancer in 2016, but wrote beautifully about how hard it can be to connect with refugees, to try to understand. He said, "I'm supposed to be writing about refugees. I don't want to write about their stoical, desperate treks to some safer place, carrying their bags of tiny comforts and remembrances. They inevitably start with a lot of blankets and food, photo albums, school books, precious objects, as much of their lives as they can carry. Men stagger under suitcases, sacks, and bags, then pick up children as self-imposed Sisyphean punishment for not being able to protect their families. They stagger with tense, bleak faces, wanting heroic proof that they can still support them physically, lift their kids out of harm's way. But as they go on, they leave the stuff. The inanimate, once unput-downable, is now dead weight. Along the way, refugees slough great winding skins, their past lives that lie in the dirt on the side of long roads. By the time they get somewhere, they're just holding the kids' hands, a mobile phone, and a secret warm and grubby fold of money that's never enough and represents the last value of their lost lives: the bakery, the surgery, the vegetable stall, the car. I don't really understand what has drawn me over and over to the story, except as a journalist, he says, my trade is to collect stories, and this story is the story, the biggest tragedy of the moment. When he was writing, it was 60 million displaced people in the world, and of course we know it's only getting worse. And they carry everything they know on their back. This journey, which for everyone on it is the most epically momentous thing ever undertaken, will shrink to being, my grandparents came from Syria, from Burma, from Congo, from Eritrea, from somewhere else. And he has this beautiful description of, once I started writing the stories, I knew I could never put them down, because it's a truth so many others refuse to pick up. And he talks about the story of the Good Samaritan in the Bible. He says it's a good secular story. You don't have to be religious. It's a story of a man beaten, robbed, lying at the side of the road. Worthy religious men, good men, pass by on the other side. But a foreigner, a Samaritan, who has no friendship for the Jews, stops and offers succor. Only if you don't turn and help can you continue to have a level-headed, disinterested, balanced, and measured opinion on the 60 million who lie at the side of the road. If you pause just for a moment and look at a single face, see the worn, cut, and calloused hands, you can't turn away. There is no sorry for your trouble, Shug. He says, I'm not a Samaritan, never have been, worked hard not to be. 9 times out of 10, I'm on the other side of the street. And let me tell you, he was so sharp-tongued, he called the Welsh little trolls. He picked on everybody indiscriminately as a journalist. And as you can imagine how the British are inside Parliament, how they might be in their columns. So this is a person who was not always very kind. He said, 9 times out of 10, I'm on the other side of the street with a clever, reasonable, purposeful folk with sanitized hands. But my job, my trade, took me back to the refugees, and I can't put their testament down. Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan in answer to the question, does anyone know? Who is my neighbor? Yes. Who is my neighbor? And Jesus tells the story. The one who actually stops and helps you. The one you actually stop and help. And part of it is, it's helpful to hear some statistics, like the fact it's doubled in the years since A.A. Gill died, the number of displaced people we have in the world. That can resonate with us, right? But mostly statistics of millions of people doesn't really weigh on us. But as he says, if you look at the one face and you see the set of calloused hands, then you're brought in. Then you see other people as human, and you become more human. I've often wondered, why is it that the Samaritan stops and helps? I think he lived more at the margins, and he traveled the road every day. He wasn't a religious man going to the temple, needing to stay clean. If the priest had stopped, or the priest helper had stopped, they would have had to spend days purifying themselves. But the Samaritan could stop and care, and I think his humanity was touched, so he could help the person who'd been robbed and left for dead. The book that I found that speaks to me the most about all this was written by Javier Zamora. He actually lives in Tucson now. And in 1999, when he was 9 years old, he set out pretty much alone. His family had paid a coyote to go with him, and he ended up with another group from El Salvador. His parents had left when he was 1, his father, and 4, his mother, because they had to leave El Salvador because of their connections to politically considered unsavory, unsafe groups in El Salvador. So he finally gets to leave at 9. And he loses his coyote, he loses everybody except for a core family. They called themselves family. There was a moment when their first attempt to cross, when La Migra arrives with lights and boots and trucks, and 3 men run off. The 3 men with them run off. And one of them turns around and comes back and helps the woman, the girl, and Javier, who are left. So that one man, of course, is arrested, and they're put in a cage, and they're told, if you try this a second time, you'll be imprisoned for 10 years. They tried a second time, and a very kind Border Patrol agent feeds them, hears it's their second time, and leaves them in Mexico without leaving them at the prison. So they try a third time and actually make it. But it's interesting to hear how Chino, the one man who comes back, himself has been slowly humanized in the process. When they were on a boat leaving Guatemala to come to Mexico, and Javier's cold, Chino is the one to take him on his lap and try to zip his coat around him. And eventually, as they walk together, Chino says he reminds him of his little brother, And Javier says, "Where's your brother?" "He's dead." So it's really interesting to watch how Chino himself becomes more human. And at first, the woman, the girl, and Javier are seen as family. They're, you act as if you're a family, pretend you're a family, that will look better. And then finally, Chino, who's 10 years younger than the wife, he's only 19, he's the father as well. And they both have little rings to wear. And they really take it seriously. Javier wrote this book in part to heal, and in part to thank them and hope they'll see the dedication. They don't have to read the rest of the book, just read the dedication. He wanted to thank them for keeping him alive and bringing him over. But he also says he wanted to do a specific thing writing this book. I didn't want to replicate what, in my opinion, a lot of journalists do when talking about immigration, or what a lot of non-immigrants do when they write either fiction or nonfiction about immigrants, which is that they only focus on the horror of what it means to make it across 1, 2, 3 countries in order to make it to the United States. It was a tall order that I couldn't have done without the help of my brilliant therapist and my amazing partner. I want to offer up a better, a more full, a more true, a more honest account of what it truly means to be a human being trying to make it across the border, to be reunited with our loved ones. In order to do that, I had to dig not at all that deep in my memory for jokes, amazing food, fart wars that we experienced on the way up here. In doing so, I hope I've painted a fuller picture of the people that helped me survive, the people that showed me what it would look like to be an amazing, badass human being. And so his mother, he finally did make it to his parents, and his mother calls those 2 adults, the 19-year-old and the 28-year-old, who helped him survive, his angels. But he doesn't like that because he wants people to see them as human. And he just doesn't want to put them on that pedestal. In a way, as we become more human, I think we connect more with love, with the divine. In all our imperfection. And there are scenes of drool, and at one point they cross a field and someone says, "Farm." And they know it's a farm because they step in manure and it's wet and they slide. Where else in the desert do you do that, right? Again, reminding you of life with the shepherds and the ranchers and body fluids, that we all live as human beings. So I know sometimes it's hard for us to embrace these flawed, difficult bodies we have, but isn't that how you have been more patient and loving with other people? I know sometimes it makes me crotchety when my body doesn't behave as it hasn't been, and I know that some of us are in pain. But doesn't it also make you more compassionate, more able to reach out to other people, more able to walk with them? When I was 30, I had chickenpox. It was 6 months before the vaccine came out. And when I saw children with funny pox on their face, I would run up, much to their parents' terror, and say, "Oh, isn't it horrible? I know exactly how you feel." So this Christmas season, I hope you embrace being human. I think that's the only way we'll start to understand everybody in this world with more love and more understanding. Whether it's crazy teenagers doing donuts and drifting in the middle of a park full of trees where they had no business driving, whether it's unknown strangers who come into your path. As the Pope says, the reasons people migrate are complicated and need to be studied. But most of all, we need to create a world where people can choose to leave and come back again, a world where that is possible. Thank you.
Our closing words today, "Our work has just begun," were written by Emily Richards, who served as the Director of Religious Exploration of the First Unitarian Society of Ithaca, New York since 2020, and is thrilled to now also be serving as the Director of Congregational Life. Emily has been a UU since she was a teenager. With a passion for the important work of ministry, a background in music education, and many years of administrative experience, she feels fortunate to be able to use her talents and expertise to help create community and connection for members of all ages. Emily is also a mom to 2 girls, a choral conductor and singer, and a lover of cooking, nature, and all things geeky. Interesting person. Okay, let's take a moment to become present, please, to pause and notice how you are in this moment after hearing all our readings. Our work today is at an end, and our work has just begun. The work of holding one another in this community in love, the work of trusting that we are on the right path, the work of believing that what connects us is stronger than what separates us, the work of engaging in that which makes us whole, the work of deeper understanding and commitment, the work of letting go of that which does not serve us, the work of radical inclusion, the work of collective liberation, the work of this beloved community, a beloved community of which we are all part, a place where we are welcomed, respected, valued, cherished, a place where we belong. Go in peace. Amen, and blessed be. That's it. Yeah.